I think there are many similarities between Detroit's current condition and the condition that Berlin was in the post-war years, and particularly after the Berlin Wall was erected. When Ungers did the Green Archipelago project, he was trying to deal with a diminishing population and how you would maintain some kind of urban density and vibrancy in that city. As a concept, the archipelago is a very compelling one that has endured in architectural thinking since the moment he released it, which is what, late 1970s now, 77? Here we are in 2016. Maurice Cox, the planning director of the city of Detroit, who is also an architect, actually shows drawings of the archipelago project that Ungers did for Berlin to constituencies and communities in Detroit as examples of ways to creatively think about neighborhoods in the city. And when we started this project, Monica and I wanted these architects that we selected from across the country to also use their imaginations in a kind of similar way. And the two models that we gave them were Mathias Ungers' Berlin Green Archipelago and Cedric Price's Potteries Think Belt in Staffordshire, England. Because the Think Belt, as you probably know, was a project for a university that would occupy a now no longer used ceramics factory. And of course, Berlin, with its population problems and being sort of isolated, had a very similar resonance with what we were hoping the architects here would accomplish. I charged them to be that good. I said, these are the bars that you must try to reach or go beyond. We really feel architecture is terribly important, that architecture has still a great deal to contribute to the city formally and through ideas. And the architectural thinking, which is different than landscape thinking and different than the kinds of thinkings an urban planner would do. And that's what this exhibition is about. That architecture has a role in the city that's very important to play, and especially in the post-industrial city that is trying to figure out what its future directions are. Well, in many ways, these neighborhoods are already a kind of archipelago situation. There are areas where the major factory has closed, and so the houses immediately around it that were once a vibrant neighborhood have been abandoned and demolished. There are other neighborhoods like Mexican Town, one of the neighborhoods that we chose to have a site in the exhibition, that are very vibrant, that are alive with immigrant life and people who are new to America and starting new businesses. And so there's many kinds of things happening in these neighborhoods. In Mexican Town, people were very excited to work with us because they have a large site in Mexican Town between an industrial railroad and a residential neighborhood. And they wanted something that mediates between really two extremes. And they don't want to develop a strip shopping center, which of course would be a kind of wall that would keep a barrier between the industrial and the domestic, but also is very unimaginative, very banal. And these people were very excited to work with the architects that we assigned to their site, because it allowed them to talk about what aspirations they had for their neighborhood, which is already a very intact neighborhood. But between that neighborhood and, say, the Eastern Market neighborhood on the east side of downtown Detroit, there's a very vibrant neighborhood with food stalls. It's really the food distribution center of Detroit, both wholesale and retail. And there's a railroad cut between it and a neighborhood that's really died away. There's not much there. So how does this vibrant neighborhood jump that cut? the people in the vibrant neighborhood were really engaged with the architects, telling them, we need the potential to be able to get across this trench where the railroad used to run, and what would happen on the other side. We need that neighborhood to come back. So that's another site that the architects worked with many people in the area about how to take this yet another sort of island of activity and extend it across this barrier so that Detroit becomes more full, shall we say. Detroit has been the site of a great deal of demolition, particularly of abandoned homes, because they're dangerous. Many of them were made with wood, and so they're torched, lots of arson. The fire department is constantly answering fire calls. So the city has been demolishing these abandoned houses so that the city is safer and cleaner. Because of the demolition, we said to the architects who have buildings on their sites, three of the 4 sites have buildings on them, and we asked them, do not tear these buildings down. And so the 3 architects who worked on the historic Packard automotive plant all kept the structural frame of the building, because the structural frame is quite solid and very intact. It's the walls and the roofs that are really in a state of ruin, not the structure. And so they're playing with the structure rather than demolishing it to do different kinds of activities. One is a vertical botanical garden and farm. One is a new think tank for corporations and universities to work together. And another is a place to start to research how one could recycle building material from demolished buildings to make new kinds of building materials that could be used going forward. In Mexican Town, there's a kind of derelict building which didn't need to be kept. It's not significant, but one of the architects is proposing to keep it and to it was a sort of big garage. Is proposing to use it as an open-air marketplace below with an air purification plant on the top, because the air quality in this particular area is not very good. The other site that has a very strong building on it is the U.S. Post Office mail sorting facility along the Detroit River. And the city was very interested in having us look at this site because they feel this post office, which is gradually being vacated because email has replaced mail and they don't need to use this building in this way anymore. How do we take this building, which is a literal wall, a block-long wall, how do we penetrate this building so that the neighborhood to the north can move through to the river and have a more recreational riverfront to enhance the life of that neighborhood, which is an historic neighborhood. So we asked them not to tear that down, to try to work with that and find new ways to work with it. And the architects did not tear it down, but rather dug into it. Some of them carved holes out of it. Another one took a big chunk out of the middle, but so left 2 boxes instead of a wall. So there's now a big corridor between the 2 buildings that leads to a new sort of canopy structure that opens onto the river. So there are many, many different ideas for how to reuse and engage buildings without historic preservation, without nostalgia, and without romance. We are really hoping that this helps Detroit sort of resituate itself as a model for a new kind of thinking, where Detroit was the model for using the car, or the model of industry, of Fordism, essentially. The model, they invented the assembly line, they invented Motown music, which captured the spirit of a generation in the late 50s and 60s. I mean, they've done so many creative, imaginative things. Perhaps today in a post-industrial city, what that city does is more about itself and its population and how it treats that population, and that population in their everyday life should have the opportunity to experience and inhabit and use great architecture.